3 Lives, 3 Worlds. Wherever step goes, Lotus blooms. Metamorphosis. By Tangqi. English translation. Wixsite.com. Lotus Step Chapter 2, Book 1. Although thousands of different flora exist in this world, in general, there are only 4 types: flower god, flower immortal, flower monster, and the ones that are unable to change forms. The world's flora can feel and are aware of their environment, but the ones that are able to absorb the spiritual essence of heaven and earth, cultivating into human form, are few and far between. Either they have good roots and grow into a clan leader, or they are planted in a good place imbued with an abundance of spirit essence, allowing them to easily grow and cultivate into a beautiful flower spirit monster. The hundreds of different flora found in the 100 Flower Tower belong to the former. Many years ago, Chengyu's father had indeed spent a lot of effort sequestering the leaders of 100 flower clans into the 10 Flower Tower. It was through this method that Chengyu was able to safely survive her predestined illness calamity. It must be borne in mind that if not for Chengyu, these 100 flowers and trees would have been able to assume human form more than 10 years ago, and 10 Flower Tower would not merely have Zhu Jin and Li Xiang managing it. But Huafei Wu, who had originated from an old forest deep inside the mountains, represented the latter type of flower monster cultivation. Huafei Wu's hometown was not an ordinary mountain. It was a mountain cloaked in a heavy fog of spiritual essence in the 4 seas and 8 realms known as the Zhiyu Immortal Mountains. It was also home to the master of the 100 billion rivers and mountains in the thousands of mortal worlds, Immortal Lord Song-Yi. Huafei Wu grew next to the pavilion in Lord Song-Yi's rear gardens. The immortal lord loved to enjoy his tea in the pavilion, and when his unfinished tea grew cold, he would water her with it. Lord Song-Yi had no idea that watering flowers with tea was taboo. Huafei Wu was lucky. Not only did she survive the constant watering, but on one fateful day, she mysteriously transformed into a flower monster. Chengyu was extremely curious about this and asked Huafei Wu, "You transformed at the residence of an immortal. Shouldn't you have transformed into a flower fairy or a flower god? Why did you transform into a flower monster?" Huafei Wu explained animatedly. When the flower master passed on, the hundreds and thousands of flowers became monsters, and this world no longer has any flower gods. Chengyu replied, "I do not understand what you mean." Huafei Wu was too embarrassed to admit that she herself did not quite comprehend her own explanation, and rubbed her nose. "It's fine if you do not understand. That's just what everyone says." Afraid of Chengyu's further persistence in pressing on the matter, Huafei Wu changed the subject. "Why do all the flowers here call you the flower master?" The 4 seas and 8 realms once had a flower master, one that had cultivated from a red lotus, an honored deity among the flower gods. She was bestowed with the title of the 100,000 Flower Master. Spreading her hands before continuing, for some unknown reason, the Flower Master had passed on, but before she did so, she was said to be the only one worthy of being referred to as the Flower Master. At that time, Chengyu was just 13 years old, and 13-year-old Chengyu did not care about the life and death of a fairy, nor did it bother her that she and the fairy were coincidentally referred to by the same title. Zhu Jin had just recently rescinded her financial control, so she had put her heart and soul into worrying about her monetary future and was not inclined to think about anything else. Chengyu replied, "Huafei Wu, they call me Flower Master as I am the big boss of 10 Flower Tower, but L don't have any financial control. Zhu Jin is our true boss." Huafei Wu was somewhat shocked and asked her, "Then where did you find the money to look me up today?" Chengyu looked up at the skies and replied indifferently, "Won the money at a gambling house." Huafei Wu was taken aback when Zhu Jin, who showed up hurriedly looking for Chengyu, overheard what she said, and promptly took her back to 10 Flower Tower where she was locked up for another 10 days. Huafei Wu had every intention of finding someone who truly loved her in the mortal realm. Having survived through sinking and swimming in a money-squandering establishment like Linling Court for over a year, she realized that she would never be able to find true love in the human game world among the hedonistic sons of rich parents. With this insight, Hua Fei Wu finally became clever for once and deeply felt that she needed to find another way to achieve her dreams. However, as she was unfamiliar with the ways of the mortal world, she mulled on it for a long time before finally approaching her one and only familiar and close mortal friend, 14-year-old Cheng Yu, to be her consultant. For the wealthy families of the Dushi dynasty, when it came to raising daughters, if the elders of the family were dependable and meticulous, they would wait till the child grew to about 13 to 14 years of age, before coming up with a plan to find her a prospective marriage. The reason why Hua Fei Wu enlisted Cheng Yu for help was because she was currently of a marriageable age and ought to be more well-versed with romantic matters of the mortal realm, making her just the right person to be her consultant. As Cheng Yu had lost both her parents ever since she was little, the two flower monsters, Zhu Jin and Li Xiang, had gone through great difficulty in raising her to adulthood. They did not adhere to the traditional etiquette of raising a virtuous princess, choosing to put the importance of her lively personality and health first. In order to strengthen her bones, Zhu Jin tacitly consented to letting her assume the identity of young Master Yu, enabling her to mix with the highly spirited and lively juveniles at the Ping'an City marketplace, shooting arrows, wrestling, and playing Chinese soccer. This had resulted in Cheng Yu developing a bit of a boyish temperament. Although Princess Red Jade, Cheng Yu, had reached the same age as the other girls in Ping'an City who had begun secretly thinking about what their future husbands might look like, the first most important matter in her life was how to make more money, and the second biggest matter was how to score more outstanding goals at the next Chinese football competition. Consequently, when travel-worn Hua Fei Wu arrived at the 10-Flower Tower to discuss her romantic life with her, Cheng Yu had just completed ghostwriting several pages of school assignments for Wan Yen Jai and did not have any time to hide them, so she was in a daze throughout the conversation. But she had the spirit of sisterhood and surmised that this issue was not very difficult to handle. After sending Hua Fei Wu off, she shut herself in and focused on studying a mythical novel about immortals, spirits, monsters, and mortals with intertwined destinies. After cramming for several days, she felt as if she knew it all, so she headed to Lin Lang Court the next day. The first idea that Cheng Yu proposed to Hua Fei Wu was the concept of borrowing and returning an umbrella from the novel, The Lady in White Weighing Down the Lei Feng Pagoda. It was said that Su Shen lent the White Lady an umbrella under the eaves of a small tea house at the entrance of Shengong Lane. The next day, Su Shen went to the White Lady's home to retrieve his umbrella. The act of borrowing and returning of the umbrella formed the bonds of gratitude, and love blossomed, culminating in the story, The Legend of Lady Whitesnake. She advised Hua Fei Wu to try taking advantage of a heavy downpour to wait at the ferry crossing in the city's north with a spare umbrella. If she saw a handsome gentleman coming off the ferry without an umbrella, she could offer to lend him one, possibly trapping an unlucky soul into fulfilling an unusual romance with her. Hua Fei Wu, who hailed from the deep mountains, had neither seen much of the world nor was she well-read. She immediately thought that it was a marvelous idea, so she happily went off to prepare the umbrellas before she even listened to the second idea. The heavens were gracious. It rained the next day. Cheng Yu was still dozing off when Hua Fei Wu dragged her out of the 10-Flower Tower to the small ferry crossing in the city's north. There was a wooden pavilion by the small ferry crossing, and it was here that the two women were having a private conversation. Hua Fei Wu pointed to the two large bamboo baskets covered with oilcloth and nervously asked Cheng Yu, "I have brought 20 umbrellas, Flower Master. Do you think that's enough?" Cheng Yu was a little dazed as she replied, "Huh?" Hua Fei Wu rubbed her hands and said, "This is how I plan to do it. In case the nobles are all young, handsome, and talented, and if I like all of them, having 1 or 2 umbrellas will not be enough, so I brought 20 umbrellas to be safe, though this may barely be enough for the plan to be foolproof." Cheng Yu squatted down and began rummaging through the umbrellas inside the bamboo basket and asked Hua Fei Wu, "We need to carry these 2 baskets of umbrellas to the entrance of the ferry crossing, then I will guard them while standing next to you. So when you see someone you fancy, I will hand the umbrella over to that person, right?" She sincerely advised Hua Fei Wu, "This might make us look like we are selling umbrellas." A sudden inspiration struck as she spoke of this point. Today is such a day where selling umbrellas is a good thing. Hua Fei Wu quickly cut her short. Flower Master, why don't you just stay here to guard the 2 baskets? I will first take a few with me to scout ahead. If this ferry load has any quality goods, I will come back for the rest. But if they are not, 3 or 4 umbrellas should be enough for me to give away. Chengyu stared at the 2 bamboo baskets before her and quickly agreed. Hua Fei Wu responded to what was said only after she had walked out of the pavilion and hurriedly backtracked to instruct Chengyu. Flower Master, swear to me that you will not sell the umbrellas I left behind. Drawing circles on the ground with her feet, Chengyu replied, Okay. She raised her head and shyly glanced at her. Then, can you tell me under what price should I not sell them? Hua Fei Wu gnashed her back teeth. You cannot sell them at any price. The small pavilion was situated in a remote area. There were 2 trees in front of the pavilion, blocking it from view, so not many people would find it and use it to avoid the rain. Chengyu guarded the umbrellas till she started nodding off. In a sleepy haze, she heard a man's voice landing above her head. How much are you selling for an umbrella? She jumped in shock, half opening her eyes, and saw a pair of partially wet white-soled cloud-pattern boots. Lifting her head a little further, she saw the corner of a half-wet white silk robe. Although Chengyu's brain wasn't quite awake, she could still remember what Hua Fei Wu instructed before she left, so she vaguely replied softly, Oh, not for sale. Outside the pavilion, the sound of wind and rain blended into one, and amidst the sound of pouring rain, that person said indifferently, I sincerely wish to buy one. Offer a price, little brother. As if she was put into a difficult position, Chengyu rubbed her eyes as she replied, There is no price. Is that right? Out of that many umbrellas, there are none that can be priced? This is really interesting. A hint of interest crept into that voice, appearing as if its owner felt that this matter was truly interesting. Chengyu silently thought that if she didn't want to sell, then she wouldn't sell, and wondered how this could be interesting. She happened to finish rubbing her eyes and raised her head to look at that person in the eye. The man's eyes also happened to glance her way, and their gazes met in midair. Chengyu was distracted for a while. The man dropped his head and continued rummaging and pulling out an umbrella with his hand. The fingers on that hand were lustrous white and slender, like clear jade. The man casually said, with such a heavy rain, Sell me an umbrella, little brother. Just take it as a good deed and offer me the convenience. Deal? Chengyu did not reply him as she was completely baffled. When it came to the talent of appreciating beauty, no one other than young Master Yu in the Dushi dynasty could claim the #1 spot. Young Master Yu grew up in the 10-flower tower and frequently visited Linling Court since she was very young. Hence, even the former emperor who had 3,000 beauties in his harem did not have a fraction of the talent that young Master Yu had. Chengyu's exceptional talent in appreciating beauty was something that slowly grew from the influence of daily exposure to plenty of beautiful people. She had a secret that only the flora knew. She was born with the ability to see flowers and plants during the flowering season as enchantingly beautiful women or handsome men, regardless of whether they could transform to a human or not. Take, for example, Yao Huang, a flower that had not yet transformed. When it wasn't the flowering season, Chengyu saw him as an unopened peony flower, but once he bloomed, what she saw was no longer Yao Huang the flower, but a handsome young man sitting on her desk all day looking disdainfully at her room. At first, this gave her a lot of stress, but the next time Yao Huang bloomed, she moved him to Zhu Jin's room next door. From then on, she could hear the two of them chatting late every night. The two flower monsters were well-read and loved to learn, so she could even hear Yao Huang and Zhu Jin discussing the principles of Pythagorean theorem by the candlelight in her dreams. These were really unbearable memories to recall. As a result of growing up this way, Chengyu became rather resistant towards beauty. Looking at a stranger's face and becoming totally dazed was something that had never happened to her since she was born. This made her feel rather strange, and she couldn't help but stare at the young man in front of her twice more. She noticed that the young man's hair and clothing were half drenched by the rain, but he still looked nothing like a sorry figure. Reasonably speaking, he had been walking in the rain for a while, so the edges of his robe and shoes should have been stained with mud, yet his white robe and shoes remained spotless. The young man noticed Chengyu's fixated gaze and sized her up from head to toe before he suddenly smiled. The smile did not reach the bottom of his eyes, so it appeared to be somewhat cold. This smile was chilly, yet it held a romantic bearing. Changyu had encountered numerous beautiful people, but had never seen a person with such a conflicting temperament. Amidst the soft sound of wind and rain, the young man raised his eyebrows and said, "You are a girl." Changyu had never given it away dressing as a man, so a boom sound went off in her mind, but she paid no attention to what the young man was saying. Her entire body and mind was placed on the young man's face. The raised brow brought out the liveliness from within his cold face, making that face absolutely beautiful. Changyu was so lost in her attraction that she remained dazzled, but she still did not forget to plan for her good friend, Hua Fei Wu. She was such a model best friend. The wheels of her mind started turning very quickly as she thought of the young man who had hastily entered the pavilion. A face such as his could practically move the imperial heavens above and the earth goddess below, so it would be impossible for Hua Fei Wu to reject him. But destiny relied on opportunity, and Hua Fei Wu was not here at this moment, so she would need her to make the decision on her behalf this once. The young man spoke one more time, "Miss, this umbrella." Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by the purple umbrella that was presented before him. Changyu gazed at him with luminous eyes. "This umbrella cannot be sold, but I can lend you one. Remember to find a day to return it to Lin Lang Court." She added, "Look for Hua Fei Wu." The young man took the umbrella and lowered his head, playing with it for a moment. "Lin Lang Court, Hua Fei Wu?" Changyu nodded her head, reluctant to pull her gaze from the young man's face. The young man glanced at her again. It was a gaze devoid of warmth, but in the deepest recesses of his pupils a hint of interest emerged, and the gaze that fell on her face lingered a little longer, allowing Changyu to notice that his pupils were a dark amber color. "If I don't remember wrongly, Lin Lang Court is a brothel. Miss, you appear to look like a young mistress from a decent family," the young man said. What he really meant was asking her why he needed to return the umbrella to Lin Lang Court. This was a long story, and she was really too lazy to explain, so Changyu casually found an excuse for herself. "There is nothing more. It's just that I frequently head to Lin Lang Court for some fun, that's all." The young man looked at her, his gaze moving from her eyes down to her chin and stopped. Then he continued moving his gaze down for several inches, for fun. The young man smiled. "Do you know what kind of place a brothel is?" Changyu knew very well what it was and answered without hesitation, "A place where one could indulge in seeking pleasures." The young man's expression was somewhat profound. "As a girl, how would you be able to seek pleasures at a brothel?" Changyu was stuck. How could she seek pleasure and find fun in a brothel? All she did was to spend money on a hot pot session with Hua Fei Wu, but how could one say that out loud? She mumbled for a long time before vaguely replying the young man, to drink wine and whatnot. After her vagueness, she finally remembered that the reason she took on this white-robed young man was to matchmake Hua Fei Wu with him. So there was no reason to divulge so much about herself to him. Thus, she cleverly shifted the subject immediately onto Hua Fei Wu, even logically linking the fact that she was a regular patron of the brothel, and solemnly told the young man, "So you can believe that I am Lin Lang Court's Queen of Flowers. Hua Fei Wu are very familiar with each other." The young man said, "Oh." What did "oh" mean? Changyu couldn't fully understand for a moment, but she was observant enough to discern what he meant through his body language. She felt that the young man didn't look like he hated carrying on his conversation with her, so she let herself go, her heart seeking forgiveness from the heavenly gods and Buddha for the impending sin of talking nonsense. With both hands lightly patting together on her chest, she said, "Why should this umbrella be returned to Hua Fei Wu?" "That's because this umbrella really isn't mine, it belongs to Hua Fei Wu. And about Hua Fei Wu, she is not only beautiful, but also has the heart of a bodhisattva. She frequently comes to this ferry crossing on rainy days to care for the welfare of people caught in the rain, and that is why this umbrella cannot be sold. The more nonsense she made up, the more she became passionate about it and began believing in what she was sprouting. She even gave a timely suggestion to the white-robed young man. Huafei Wu has an elegant and gentle nature and is very good at singing and dancing. If you can spare some time after returning the umbrella, you should stay to appreciate her clear voice and wonderful dancing. It is said that when the second son of high officials Wa heard her distinct singing, he became totally enraptured by her voice, and after young Marquis Lin saw her sword dance, he disbanded his entire house of dancers. She spun her yarn till she was very happy and even felt that she had literary talent. She had used a series of parallels to flatter Huafei Wu's accomplishments. But after the bout of joyfulness, she realized she had made a mistake. The one who could sword dance wasn't Huafei Wu. Apart from her beauty and a reasonably good voice, Huafei Wu practically had no other extraordinary talent. The one famous throughout the royal capital for her sword dancing was Huafei Wu's archenemy. She hurriedly made up for Huafei Wu. However, Fei Wu recently sprained her leg, so it is likely you won't be able to watch her dance, which is a pity. While she sighed with regret, she sneaked a peek at the white-robed young man, her innermost thoughts feeling that even a wooden club would be moved with the effort she was making, so she expected the young man's face to express some fascination. However, the young man bent his head to look at the umbrella in his hand and did not appear to have much of a reaction. She also couldn't clearly discern the expression on his face. After a while, she heard the young man asking her, "So, miss, what is your name?" Chengyu was in a daze. "Huh?" The young man opened the umbrella, and it expanded with a pop, his face now blocked behind the umbrella. The young man's action of holding the umbrella by its handle and lifting it upright wasn't slow, but Chengyu caught the entire series of movements. In the wake of those movements, the edge of the umbrella first revealed the curve of a cold and stern chin, followed by his lips and the bridge of his nose, and finally that pair of unfathomable dark amber eyes. From under the umbrella, the young man repeated in a low voice, "I am asking, what is your name, miss?" Chengyu took a long time to react and coughed once. She said, "I'm just a kind soul Huafei Wu occasionally brings along to assist her while she does her good deeds. Names and such are actually not worth mentioning." The young man smiled and did not ask again. He only said a word of thanks and promised to return the umbrella to Lin Lang Court the next day. Afterwards, he raised his steps and walked into the falling rain. When Lian Song returned to Jingshan Courtyard holding the borrowed umbrella, the servant girls who often served in the courtyard had finished tidying up the hot spring in Ishi Pavilion. The older girl, Tianbu, hurried over to take the umbrella from his hand. While holding it for him, she asked him to indicate if he would prefer to warm himself up with a cup of hot wine first or take a dip in the hot spring. The rain seemed to have lightened. The entire courtyard of pear flower blossoms were enshrouded by the misty drizzle as the young man dressed in white gazed at them from a distance. "Send the wine to the hot spring. This umbrella." Pausing for a moment, he continued, "Get a servant to send this to Lin Lang Court tomorrow." There were two people of extraordinary talents in the officialdom of the Dushi dynasty. One of them was the Grand Counselor, a man whose only wish was to return to his hometown to open a pastry shop despite receiving the favor and trust of the emperor in no small measure. The other person, clearly decorated as the chief military commander with elegance and good looks surpassing all of the runner-up scholars in the whole country combined, was the current dynasty's general. The Grand Counselor, whose lifetime dream was to open a pastry shop, was named Su Ji, and he was the benefactor who saved Chengyu's life. As for that elegant and good-looking general of the current dynasty, he was the white-clothed young man Chengyu had felt would make a beautiful couple with Huafei Wu, General Lian Song. Lian Song came from a noble marquis background and was the third son of the loyal elder marquis, Zhong Yong. When he was around the age of 14 or 15, he followed his father into the battlefield, frequently illustrating his outstanding achievements. By the age of 25, he had risen to the position of Commander General and was bestowed the Commander General Mansion. He was the youngest Commander General of the first rank since the dynasty was founded. Throughout his entire life, the proud Grand Counselor Su Ji had only praised one person before, Commander General Lian, who was as famous as him. He said that Lian San was brave, had defeated powerful enemies, and established the nation's prestige. Lian San was elegant, good at painting, and skillful with the flute. Lian San also had the demeanor of an immortal who had descended to the mortal world. Su Ji had a fair bit of immortal roots and was well on his way to ascension in terms of cultivation. Though the world felt that his words of praise for Lian San were overstated, both he and Lian San understood that he wasn't exaggerating. Commander General Lian San, was indeed an immortal who had descended to this world. Among the thousands of worlds, there were billions of mortal worlds, and one of them was the Dashi dynasty. Those nurtured by heaven in these worlds are known as mortals, left to their own devices, experiencing a limited lifespan. But outside the mortal world lies the 4 seas and 8 realms, the world of immortals. In this immortal world of 4 seas and 8 realms, Lord Liansong, the third son of the heavenly lord of 9 heavens, was the water god of the 4 seas. The north, south, east, west waters were under his jurisdiction, and he was known as the supreme water god of the 8 realms. Lord Liansong, the supreme water god of the 8 realms, left the 4 seas for this mortal world because of another god. This was Tangqi, the flower god who had died under the demon-locking pagoda on the 27th heaven 44 years ago. While he was soaking in the hot spring, Liansong looked at the raindrops falling onto the pear blossoms in the courtyard, lost in his thoughts. After Tangqi's death, the flora of the world seemed to have lost some of its color. In the past, when Tangqi was around, this mortal world's rain falling on pear blossoms always made one taste the delicate emotion of a beautiful woman in tears of sorrow. As a matter of fact, it could even invoke one to experience some tender affection at times. But now, it resembled a bullied little daughter-in-law, shriveling in the rain, annoying anyone who saw it. But for some unknown reason, this cold, early spring rain and the agitating pear blossom scene suddenly made Liansong think of the time when he first met Tangqi. That was truly a past event that happened a long time ago. Whether it was 700 years ago or 800 years ago, Liansong did not count closely. Either way, it was around that time. At that time, there was no head steward managing the jade pool in the 9 heavens, so the 100 flowers of the world had no flower master. As there was no one assuming the position of flower master, it was highly inconvenient for many matters. This issue truly had nothing to do with him, but it could not be helped that his close friend, Donghua Dijun, was in charge of the god's immortal registry and office. Once, having lost to Dijun in a game of Go, Dijun had slovenly passed this burden on to him, ordering him to temporarily take his place. So he assumed Dijun's position for the time being. As he watched the flower gods under him fighting over the flower master position in plain sight and on the sly, there were times when he felt that their fights were interesting and other times when he found their incessant chirping irritating. But most of the time, he thought they were an annoyance. Within the rumors of 9 heavens, the Third Highness was a well-known playboy among the god race. All of the 4 seas were aware of his romantic fame. The young water god was handsome, well-versed in war with a highly respected status, and as the heavenly clan had always held martial strength to great esteem, all the young ladies naturally loved him. But this world had the kind of romantic love fashioned by sweet speech and honeyed words, as well as the tender consideration of others. In other words, most of the so-called romance in the world largely referred to this sort. Then, there was also the kind of heartless romance that was forged with a careless and indifferent attitude. This was the type of romance that characterized the Third Highness. Although he was a playboy from the mouths of people within the 8 realms, he did not have much extra patience towards beautiful women. He usually felt irritated whenever he came across flower gods who finally came before him, asking him to judge matters fairly after fighting each other till they were wailing interminably. Besides, the Third Highness was very different from his two older brothers who carefully observed the court etiquette of the heavenly clan ever since they were little. He would leave whenever the pestering became vexing. In the 9 heavens, he was said to be the most elusive immortal of them all. As he had always behaved in this way since he was very young, Tianjun was long accustomed to it. Despite constraining his 2 elder brothers to strict court etiquette, Tianjun was used to indulging Liansong. It was that one time when Liansong became so annoyed by the persistent pestering that he left the 9 heavens and headed to the southern realm to seek Lord Qingluo, the youngest son of the Yellow Demon Lord, 7th Lord of the demon race, for a game of Go. After the rebellion of the ghost race was suppressed, and the rebel lord of the ghost race, Qing Tsang, was sealed 20,000 years ago, the 4 seas and 8 realms were once again at peace. The god and the ghost race restored their friendship and got along rather well. Looking at the current situation, the 7th king of the demon race also suppressed his desire to stir up trouble. In the last 20,000 years, the world largely appeared to be a picture of peace. So, it was not a ridiculous notion for a god to seek a demon for a game of Go. Lord Qingluo loved having guests. Whenever there was a happy occasion, he would get his courtyard tidied to host a banquet. He was also an incredibly optimistic person. Almost every day, he could find something to be happy about in his ordinary demon life, hence hosting a feast practically became a daily affair. However, on this day, Lord Qingluo looked melancholic. A round-faced youth seated below him wore a mischievous smile as he exposed his scar. Lord Qingluo was refused entry at Princess Yang Yun's place and received the cold shoulder. The cold created a knot at the bottom of his heart, resulting in his worries displaying on his outer appearance. Princess Yang Yun was the demon race's greatest beauty of the current generation. She was rumored amongst them to be comparable to the #1 beauty of the god race, Qing Qiu's Bai Qian, and was just as beautiful. However, the demon race had always loved competing with the god race, but their repeated contesting and losing and continuously contending, constantly challenging and losing had caused them such significant psychological trauma that their self-evaluation was consistently inaccurate. Thus, Liansong did not take the rumors circulating within their race to heart. The gray-robed youth next to the round-faced youth continued lazily. The Vermilion Demon Lord has raised Xiang Yun in fear of her melting while cradling her in his mouth superscript 1, raising her into a girl whose eyes are in the sky's superscript 2. Yet Qingluo, you have your eyes on her. After receiving a glare from the frowning Lord Qingluo, he laughed. If you are only interested in her beauty, why don't you summon Chang'e to wait on you for a few days? Chang'e is intuitive and will offer you her service, and if you were to trade White Marsh for the service, I'm not sure about others, but you, Qingluo, can afford it regardless of the amount of white essence required. The crowd at the banquet guffawed. White essence is the immortal essence. The 8 realms has 4 races, god, demon, ghost, and monster, all together consisting of thousands of different living creatures. Each race has their own essence. The gods have white essence, the demons have black essence, the ghosts have green essence, and the monsters have scarlet essence. But regardless of race, the essence in a newborn baby is always diverse, and it would take all kinds of cultivation to refine its purity. The more powerful the living beings were, the purer the essence in their bodies. When the gray-robed youth ridiculed Lord Qingluo for having so much white essence despite being a demon prince, he was making fun of his incompetence at cultivation. Lord Qingluo was born with a big, inflexible one-track mind, so he often refuted others with that mindset. He paid no attention to the people around him snickering at his incompetence, yet he was very opinionated when Xiang Yun was compared to Chang'e. Chang'e? How could she possibly be compared with Xiang Yun? Lord Qingluo was accustomed to being a one-track mind and was an honest person. Even if he looked down on the woman named Chang'e, he simply couldn't say anything unkind to a woman. But at a banquet with guests from all walks of life, there were no lack of bootlickers. Someone immediately fawned. The little prince is right. A flower monster without a master could only depend on selling her smiles and earning her benefactor's pity to get by. Lowly born and cheap. How could she ever be on par with Princess Yang Yun? The monster and demon races were symbiotic in the southern realm. The monster race was weak and had been a vassal of the demon race since time immemorial. As the flower monsters were born good-looking, they were frequently taken as concubines by demons of rank. There were few masterless monsters in the southern realm. It was even rarer for flower monsters to be without a master. Deep down inside, Lord Qingluo agreed with this ingratiating remark, but he felt torn as to whether he should be so unkind to a weak woman, mumbling, "It's not nice to talk about Chang'e like this. Chang'e is, she is, she is." But after deliberating on, she is, for a long time, he could speak no further on the matter. Lord Liansong, who had been studying the small wine warmer at his side, spoke for the first time, "Chang'e." Facing Qingluo, he said, "She is called Chang'e, isn't she?" Although the Third Highness of the Heavenly Clan often came to the southern realm seeking Lord Qingluo's drinking company and chanced upon many banquets hosted by him, Liansong always sat on the honorific seat to Lord Qingluo's right, saying a few words only to Lord Qingluo when the mood struck. Many young men in the demon clans admired the Third Highness and wished to talk to him. But in the past, no one had the opportunity to start a conversation with this highness. Seeing his chance to speak with the Third Highness, the apricot eyes of the youth who fawned on Qingluo a moment ago brightened and immediately turned to face Liansong, inclining towards him as he spoke in an ingratiating tone. "Your Third Highness is not from our southern realm. There are things you didn't know." Chang'e was originally a red lotus, but a red lotus that couldn't bloom due to a natural defect. As a result, no distinguished person wanted to take her into their garden. She is a flower monster but masterless. This was already something that made her a laughingstock. But in recent years, I don't know where she got the crazy idea of wanting to cultivate into a fairy and searched everywhere for white essence. He sneered implicitly. To get white essence, she sold her smiles everywhere, making her no different from those courtesans in the mortal realm. Within the monster and demon race, Liansong held his head with his palm and looked at the apricot-eyed youth. "How beautiful is she?" The young apricot-eyed youth, who was vividly speaking with enthusiasm, got stuck and paused. "What your Third Highness is saying is..." Liansong simply gave a quick smile. "I just heard you all saying that she is beautiful, so how beautiful is she?" Men, most of them loved discussing and commenting about beautiful women, and were especially fond of doing so after getting inebriated by a bit of wine. The various lords at the banquet pondered over the Third Highness's words and swept a glance at each other meaningfully, thinking they understood his interest. The next half of the banquet was submerged in discussing Chang'e's beauty, and no one was mean about Chang'e's background again. After raising such a discussion, the Third Highness had not uttered a single word since. Outwardly, no one could tell if he was interested or not. With his iron fan in his right hand, he was simply tapping the edge of the table idly, a clear sign that he was lost in his thoughts. It was the flourishing spring season in the southern realm. The sea was blue, the skies were clear, and the flowers and trees were luxuriant. The scenery was quite good, so Liansong stayed for a few more days. The Eight Realms believed that Liansan was a player, and they were undoubtedly convinced on the matter. But what the Eight Realms couldn't be sure of was, out of the millions of beauties in the world, which kind would the Third Highness love? Tianjun had 3 sons. His eldest son, Yongqiu, was upright and serious. His second son, Sangji, was honorable, and both were not easy to curry favor with until the Third Highness. Liansong finally gave a glimmer of hope to the bootlickers intending to move up the ranks with flattery. However, the thoughts of the Third Highness were difficult to fathom. For example, you would assume the Third Highness fancied a certain type of beauty because it was indeed the same kind currently keeping him company. Just when you also want to present a similarly beautiful woman to him, the belle accompanying him the next day could unpredictably be completely opposite to the type of beauty from the day before. Amidst the 4 seas and 8 realms, everyone felt that in terms of promiscuity, the Third Highness cannot be counted as the most promiscuous. But when it came to difficulty in serving him and grasping his unfathomable mind, the Third Highness should be at the zenith. However, was it not a few days ago that Lian Song had raised the question on how beautiful Tangqi was at the banquet? This offered a thread of hope to the southern realm nobles who wanted to curry favor with this prince from the heavenly clan. Everyone was very hardworking, making every effort to seize this glimmer of hope. Before the third day was out, someone sent Tangqi into Lian Song's room. Lian Song remembered that Tangqi was in the depths of the candlelight. Whenever Lian Song came to the southern realm, he often stayed at a small courtyard on the cliff of Shifeng Mountain. It was past midnight when he returned from a game of Go at Qingluo's place. Treading through the bright moonlit ground, he stepped into the hanging flower door of his small courtyard on the cliff. Just as he looked up, he saw the candlelight in the north room. Outside the north room stood a Persian silk tree. The velvety feather-like flowers on the entire tree were dyed a shade of pure gold by the moonlight, appearing somewhat beautiful. A thin rope was fastened to the tree, extending into the north room. He had personally tied the other end of the rope to a flower stand in the north room earlier this morning. Hanging on the rope were several pieces of letter paper he intended to dry after making them out of boredom. A strong gust of wind began blowing in the courtyard, the disturbance flickering the candle flames in the room and fluttering the papers on the rope like butterflies elegantly desiring to take flight. Lian Song raised his hand slightly, the tree went still, and the wind stopped. When he stepped towards the papers, he saw that the closer he got to the candlelight, the insects, birds, flowers, and plants on the paper appeared to take on a different kind of liveliness when the weak light illuminated through it. He rummaged through the papers on the rope casually as he walked into the room. The more the candlelight flourished, the more it became densely woven. Some of the light fell onto the lamp stands, while some fell onto the ground, arranging itself in a variety of heights with a somewhat interesting artistry. In the recess of the candlelight, a woman in red raised her head slightly to call out his honorific title, Your Third Highness. Her face was indeed beautiful and could live up to being as beautiful as a painting. Lian Song shifted his gaze towards her, but barely pausing for an instant before moving his gaze to a letter paper printed with the flowers of the 4 seasons and casually said, Tangqi. The woman's eyes revealed her slight surprise. How did your Third Highness know I am Tangqi? Her voice was soft. It was said that among the 3 sons of Tianjun, the most intelligent was the Second Highness, Zhangji. When Zhangji was born, 36 5-color birds from Hemingjunji Mountain flew straight to the skies to congratulate him. This was an auspicious sign from heaven. Later, Zhangji cultivated into a high immortal at 30,000 years of age, a clear proof that he was an outstanding talent among the gods. Under the glowing halo of the Second Highness, Zhangji, his 2 brothers seemed pale in comparison regardless of aptitude or merit. But some gods had a different view on this matter. For instance, the former master of the universe, Dong Huadijun. Dong Huadijun was born without any auspicious signs from heaven and earth, yet he later unexpectedly grew up to be the master of the universe. As a result, he was not superstitious about things like heaven and earth firing golden rays with a few pathetic birds flying around the heavens, the flight of birds signifying excellent future prospects for someone on the day of their birth. Dong Huadijun always felt that Lian San was a malleable genius. After Tianjun had Lian San, the matter of him procreating a son could be stopped from this point. In any case, he would not be able to produce anyone more intelligent than Lian San. With the kind of intelligence affirmed by the picky Dong Huadijun, the first meeting between Lian San and Tangqi naturally went without the usual, "Who are you?" "I am Tangqi." "Who sent you to my room?" "So-and-so sent me to your room." "What are you doing here?" "I came here to keep your Third Highness company, but your Highness, I will only sell my talents, not my body," type of dialogue. Lian Song felt that even Tangqi's question, "How did your Third Highness know that I am Tangqi?" was so simple that it did not require him to waste his time answering. He continued scrutinizing the 4 seasons floral paper as before. Taking it down, he brought it closer to the candlelight, illuminating it. After a while, he said, "Even if they compel you, given your ability, you didn't have to come if you were unwilling. But they have misled you into believing that I am an immortal with inexhaustible white essence, so if you have made me happy, I would have plenty of white essence for you to use." But since I have been cultivating in tranquility so far, when he spoke of the word cultivating in tranquility, as if he found it laughable himself, he smiled an extremely nonchalant smile and corrected himself, since I have been cultivating. My body no longer has the slightest trace of green essence. Your younger brother, who was hurt by the two-winged tiger in Chiyu Cave, needs white essence accompanied by green essence. I'm afraid my pure white essence might not be beneficial to him. The woman's expression shifted slightly, but she calmed down instantly. A little flower monster showing no traces of fear nor cowardice before a prince of the heavenly clan. The little flower monster's voice remained soft. Your third highness is wise. Your third highness has seen through it all. Chang'e can't deceive your highness. Since your third highness does not have anything Chang'e needs, I will take my leave at once. She simply stood up decisively as she spoke, patting the dust that did not seem to exist on her knees, and proceeded to walk out from the shadow of the candlelight confidently. She walked to the front of Lian San, thought for a moment and gave a curtsy, speaking seriously, Your third highness, it's late at night. It's better that you rest early. Although I did not set up the candlelight, if your highness feels that it is not very good after looking at it, I will dismantle them before leaving and call it a day. Consider this as repaying your third highness for being forthright with Chang'e. It was at this moment that Lian San turned to look at her seriously. There were many beautiful women coming and going around the third highness, so he paid no attention to them. Having observed beautiful women for around 10 to 20,000 years, he was very familiar with their routine posturing. After his previous words, the intuitive beauty would certainly reply with, Your third highness must be joking. Your third highness is incomparably noble. Being able to serve your third highness is my good fortune, much less asking for whatever white or green essence from your highness, the not-so-perceptive ones would at least respond with. How did your third highness know that the white essence I am searching for is actually for my younger brother, and not for cultivation like what people commonly say? Your third highness is so insightful on distinguishing matters, I deeply admire, and so forth. The third highness felt that this little flower monster was a bit interesting. The little flower monster standing a few steps before him appeared to look rather sincere while waiting for his reply. The petals of the four seasons flower on the floral paper in his hand were not dyed skillfully, so the third highness casually fed it to the nearest stand of candlelight. I heard you were very intuitive, he said, waiting for the floral paper to burn out before slightly raising his eyes, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Understanding his words, the little flower monster was clearly a little shocked. Staring at him, she took 2 steps back, seriously pondering for a while before looking at him again. Should your third highness ask me to go, I will go. I even wanted to help you dismantle the candelabrum before my departure. This isn't enough to be considered intuitive. This was Chang'e. The third highness gently rubbed his forehead. The bits and pieces of old memories from 700 or 800 years ago were surprisingly unforgotten. When Tianbu served in Liansong's Yuanji Palace at 36 Heaven, she was the most capable fairy within. Although she had lost her magic after coming to the mortal realm, which made a lot of work utterly inconvenient, she continued to be dependable and meticulous, just like when she was in Yuanji Palace. From a distance, she saw Liansong shaking the wine pot while soaking in the hot spring. Figuring out that he had finished drinking a pot of wine and would be in the mood to have another, she quickly carried another pot she had preheated on the small stove and presented it over to him with haste. After placing the pot of wine carefully on the side of the hot spring, Tianbu suddenly heard her master asking, speaking of which, do you think that Yanlan and Chang'e are somewhat different in their temperament? Tianbu contemplated for a moment and thoughtfully replied, Princess Yanlan's soul is the rebirth of the flower master Chang'e. She has grown up in the mortal world after all. Her past memories of being in heaven or in the southern realm were mostly lost. Some changes to her personality were inevitable. She probed further, Your Highness, do you think it is a pity? She saw Liansong leaning against the side of the hot spring, closing his eyes slightly. It is a pity. End of Lotus Step Chapter 2, Book 1. By Tangqi. English translation. Elad Zoompai de Wixsite.com